So I want to give Nathan again a shout out for completing and doing a phenomenal job reaching all his goals in the marathon. It was already last weekend? Is it
Yeah,
already?
it was
Or it was 2 weeks?
on Sunday.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah,
1
it
week
was on
ago.
Sunday. Wow,
Mm-hmm.
It feels like so much has happened since that time.
Yep.
So, Nathan, I really think this is a good time. You went through a lot. We talked quite a bit throughout this process. You know, I hope you don't mind me sharing a little bit about their previous comments. You know, it was not that long ago before this episode that there were some comments and some injury issues that you considered going, I may not ever be able to run again. And then, you know, fast forward to last Sunday where you ran, your goal was under 3:30 and you did 3:29 right on the dot. It was great, right? Looking strong at the end there. I encourage you guys, go check out Instagram. There's some great videos. You look like just awesome. Probably didn't feel like that, but you looked awesome going through the finish line. Training went really well. There's a couple little bumps there. And so what we're hoping is we can share and talk about a little bit of Nathan's experiences and normalize some of the things that you will go through in marathon training. That includes things like kind of what to expect with training, pain experiences with training and gear, what's normal, what's not, right? And understanding that there are some things that are going to pop up and they will go away. The biggest question we've gotten from both emails and social media is why Nathan chose the shoe he did. And that was a big talk back and forth. And any other experiences you had going through this and completing this. So what should we start with? What do you want to start with?
Well, I think you hit on something in terms of like not knowing if I was going to run again. And I think to just put a little bit out there, I have some like some skeletal changes, deformities. What's the right? I don't know what the right word that makes the most sense to everybody, but I have some skeletal changes within my hip joint, which still at this point could be considerations for surgery. Like I went in to see an orthopedist and they said I would get you in next week to work on this. And that was like a year and a half ago. And he said, yeah, and we might have to do if we get in there and it looks as bad as I think it might, we might have to do a hip replacement. And I'm 30. So I'm like, I can't handle the reality of talking about hip replacement. And although I work with people every single day on communicating about injury and pain and changes in their bodies, when it's you, it just feels different. And you can't be your own physical therapist, your own physician, or your own doctor. At least I can't. And so it was just a very interesting experience. I was able to rehab my way out of some of the pain I was having at the time, still walking through some of that stuff. But I think it's been really an interesting journey of marathon training because, like I said, even though that I'm a physical therapist, I work with runners all the time, and I dare to say I do help a lot of runners. I had a lot of issues in my own training. So my first marathon that I ran was in 2017. It was a Chicago marathon, and training did not go well at all. 3 weeks before the marathon, I couldn't run more than a quarter mile because of lateral knee pain on the outside of my knee. And so I took 3 weeks off and then I just went for it. Marathon day. And I ended up running like a 3:54. So I finished it, but it wasn't pretty. And it was also like 85 and 95% humidity in Chicago that day or whatever it was, or that's what it felt like at least. So I started cramping up early on, but ultimately I was just trying to like train for something that I wasn't ready for. Like I was saying, I want to hit this pace, but I had never ran even close to that far at that pace ever before. So I was just kind of like arbitrarily picking things and trying to shoot for it, which resulted in an injury in training. And then I tried last year in 2020 to train for a marathon. And it was kind of the same thing where I set expectations to be like, I'm going to run I said I want to run a 3:30, but then as I started training, I had like one successful long run, and I was like, you know what? I could actually probably run a 3:10. Like based on that 17 miler, I could probably run a 3:10. So then I upped all of my training to meet an expectation that I had for myself, and I ended up with a stress fracture because every single run I was pushing to the limit. And you know, you can reflect back on all this stuff and you would know that you're making stupid decisions, but when you're in the middle of it and you don't have anybody guiding you, you just are like, I'm just going for this and I'm feeling good right now. And then it landed in a stress fracture. And so I think this year I wanted to make some like active changes in the way that I approach training. And one of those big ones was hooking up with Dave Ames. with Aim For It Run coaching. And I think that my favorite thing about that whole process was just, I could take away all of the mental load of thinking about what's the right decision today for what I should run, because he's worked with enough runners and knows enough of the science of training and how getting to a marathon works, that I could just entrust to him like what I was supposed to do that day and explain kind of how I felt and what that means. And then he progressed me forward, and he slowed me way down. So like all of my running, if you looked at my paces a year ago to my paces now, like most of my runs are so much slower than they were a year ago. And even when I started training this year, I was testing a prototype back in February, and I got a actually pretty significant calf tear that I had to rehab, and it was still nagging me at the beginning. So when I started doing coaching with Dave, we were both like, we don't even know if we're going to be able to run the marathon, but we can go week by week. And so we thankfully eventually just like every week was like, okay, that went okay. It went okay. And I think having somebody just kind of directing the ship who knew what they were talking about, for someone like me who's made a lot of mistakes before, and I was not ever coached in running. Like I didn't do high school or college running at all, or even middle school. So it was just a really great experience to have him coaching me. But yeah, so I don't know. That was just a bunch of rambling about training, but I think that it was fun to get to a start line healthy.
I think it touches also on the training and coaching perspective, is that, even for those of us that have been coached before, when you're really preparing for a race like this, it's good to get additional resources. And sometimes it's really good to have what I would call a mentor. And my fellows and some of the people that I've worked with know that I've talked about this before, that it's good to have a mentor and somebody who can see the big picture. Because oftentimes when you're in the moment, you don't see it. You're like, what workout can I do today? I have to hit this pace. I have to hit this number of reps. And sometimes it's really nice to have somebody both encourage you, but also hold you back a little bit from redlining. Because it's very easy to redline during training or workout, especially, daily life emotion gets to you. So it's really nice to have that guide. And I think that combination, it really speaks. I mean, we're biased because we love Dave.
Right.
But yeah, I think this was a very good experience to kind of see that and have some guidance and be pulled back. That's something a lot of runners that I see, and a couple of them that I work with, lots of people love to run fast because I got to post it on Strava, but it's really focus on the race day. Don't focus on the individual runs, the build up. But that's great. I think this went really well. Now, you've mentioned some challenges that you've gone through previously in terms of injuries and pain. Can you talk us through a little bit about what experiences you had this round?
Oh, yeah.
In terms of pain, in terms of, I wouldn't say injuries, but you can call them injuries, in terms of small interruptions to training. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And David, did you have something too? I saw your hand go up.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I was going to say, and a good coach won't hesitate to pull you back.
Right.
So, we've been going pretty hard the last couple of weeks, and I write notes to my coach after every workout. And I think it was like 2 workouts ago, and I was saying, like, I hit all my times, paces. On paper, it looked awesome. But I was really tired going into this. I had to battle my way through this one. And I had been writing semi-similar things like that for the last 2 or 3 workouts.
Huh.
And he literally was like, all right, no, we're not working out Friday. We're going to go Saturday. When we go Saturday, then we're going to have this. The other guys are going to go another 2 miles on this. I'm holding you from those 2. And then I was like, if I'm feeling okay, can I do those 2? No. I prefer not.
That's awesome.
So it was like, and then I'm feeling okay now, and we're back on it. We're not,
That's
it's
great.
just that idea of not redlining too much.
Right. Yeah. It's a big deal. Yeah, Matt, into your question now regarding like things I encountered along the way. I think, because marathon training is so long and so involved, anytime that I would start to feel something, I would start to get really concerned. I'm like, is this going to be the thing that holds me out? And I think that little level of anxiety was tied to a couple things. And I think Dave helped coach me through one of these. He continuously, his big thing, he talked about it on our podcast, but expectations running versus holistic running. And so if you put expectations on any part of running, it's just setting yourself up to like either exceed, which is great, or fall short, which is what ruins the sport for you. And when you run holistically and thinking not about, I want to meet this time or this day on this day or whatever, but you're just trying to be where you're at and enjoying the process of running and all the other parts of your life, it goes a lot smoother. But anyway, I think that there's two big ones. I had done, and they always were tied to some of the workouts. So the one workout was a 3x10 kind of tempo, pretty classic tempo workout. And after that, I started getting a little bit of pain in the bottom of my foot. And then I had a 20 miler that weekend, and I made it through the 20 miler, but then the next Monday, it was just like pretty solid discomfort with every single step, even with walking. And so, you know, I talked to you, Matt, about it because I was starting to freak out. I'm like, am I going to be able to keep running? And you kind of encouraged me that, you know, like your body's adapting to brand new stimuli of higher mileage and new workouts together. And that pain does not mean that something's necessarily like brought to a point where it's not going to recover as you go. And so instead of like stopping running and doing full out like freak out about what I'm feeling, it was Dave pulled back, you know, some of my distance for that week because it was after my first 20 miler anyway. So it was an more off week. So that was pulled back. Some of the paces were pulled down. And in the meantime, I did stuff with rehab that I know kind of what to do regarding the type of foot pain that I was having. And by the next week, Tuesday, it was all gone again. But at the time, it felt pretty like it was past the point of no return, which wasn't the case. It was just my body adapting to stuff. And then I would say the worst part was tapering. People like started talking to me about the taper crazies and just like the mental state that you get in, but everything just started hurting no matter what I did. And then, and that sounds really exaggerated, but it would be like one day my hip would kind of hurt and then my knee would kind of hurt. The most consistent one was I had my final workout was some 800s, and it was a week and a half before the marathon, and I went a little bit faster than I was planning on going, but I was just going based on feel. And then my FHL, flexor hallucis longus, like if I curled my big toe, it would hurt. And I was like, this is it. I just ruined it on my last workout. And it honestly hurt up until race day. Dave, Matt, DJ, everyone's like, you're going to be fine. Like you've trained, step on the line. It's not going to bother you. And it was true on race day, literally no pain at all, or pain sensation in that area. And it really was, our brains are powerful. And I know this working as a physical therapist. Dave told this to me as a coach. Like he sees this so much with all of his athletes going through different parts of their training, and just the power that our brain has to control the sensations that we feel in our muscles and our tendons and ligaments, and just kind of what's going on in our joints. You can't just take it at face value. You got to be able to kind of parse out what's scary and what's not. And so I think the encouragement to just kind of push through was a big deal. Not push through in a dumb way, but push through in a smart way, and not freak out.
Yeah, not freaking out is huge in training, because you're going to get niggles. Like, it's going to happen.
Thanks for using that word.
Yeah. There's going to be little things that come up, but being able to parse out what's actually dangerous and not is a skill in itself. And sometimes it takes a few injuries to start developing that. But
yeah,
I mean, that's good. I mean, you're kind of like learning what that adaptive feel feels like, because sometimes it just gets sore. It feels off, and you're like, man, but it doesn't like hurt. Like there's this weird like underlying thing, like where I'll tell people like I'm fine, but I feel this, or like, you know, or like these things, but I'm fine. I know I'm fine.
And I think I get in my own head sometimes where it's like I feel it, and it has a biomechanical mechanism of injury, and it hurts when I activate that tendon or muscle. So I'm like, so it must be quote unquote real. And it's funny how, like, I literally haven't had a lick of pain during or after the marathon at all of the FHL.
See, my comment to that would be that your pain is certainly real, right? Because pain is definitely real, right? So what I'm about ready to talk about, and don't let me go too far off, because literally, like, this is
pain
part of my PhD.
Science.
Yeah.
Here
So pain is real. There is a biomechanical component to it, but it also goes beyond that, where pain is a very complex experience that is very person dependent and is based on both biomechanical stuff, how your brain processes information, past experiences, emotional components. This is far too in-depth for us to go into in this podcast in a short time. But expectations, emotions, all that kind of stuff can, it's an alarm, right? It's your body trying to go, hey, something's going on. This may be a threat. And part of our job, and there's a skill to this. This is a learning process of going, is this alarm kind of, do I really need to turn this up, or can I just turn this down? Because, I'm going to get through this. It's just one of the things that happens. My body's just giving me some warning signs, whether it's from actual tissue damage or potentially something else is something you have to figure out. But pain is real, but you have to scrutinize it and figure out what does it mean? Because it's your body trying to tell you something. What exactly it is may not be the actual tissue that you're feeling. It may be something else. So there's a lot going into this. There's a lot of expectations you had, previous experiences going, I might not run again. Mm-hmm. Plus a lot of expectations going, we all knew about this. This is something we really want to do. You have a goal. You've got a coach. You've got people that are kind of, we all are going to support you no matter what, right? But, there's also expectations you're putting on yourself, which creates additional pressure. So you got to take all those factors in. And that's one of the things that I try to remind both Nathan as well as patients is going, you know what, these things are going to happen. And pain is normal, especially marathon training, right? Like you're putting in more miles than like you ever have. So it can be very intense. So you have to kind of be ready to kind of go, something's going to hurt. I gotta check my alarm and go, is this a really big danger, or is this kind of going to be one of those things that will just come and go?
And I think that's where one of my huge takeaways from this training cycle was the necessity for me of having a team that running can be so individual, but for me in this cycle, having a team of people who could reflect on my experiences and help me think about them accurately. Because I am not objective when it comes to myself. When I'm working with other people, great. But when it's myself, I think I found I need that team around me, and having you guys as my therapists, right? And then having Dave as my coach, the combination. And I think I learned so much about the value of a coach for me as a physical therapist in terms of who I want to work with when it comes to treating my patients, and like who are runners who have coaches. Like I will now, after this experience, I will go out of my way to speak with the coach. Like if it's not just some random like internet kind of like spitting out algorithms to people, like if they have a legitimate coach who exists, I think I've just learned that the value of a good coach in terms of getting the runner where they want to go is a huge deal, especially if they know what they're talking about. So, but yeah, that's all the training, I guess. And then race day came, which
so I think we have to start with something first before we talk a little bit more about race day, because everybody's going to ask this question. Why did you choose the shoe you decided on?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, you guys heard me belly aching. What a terrible thing to belly ache about. Belly aching about which shoe, if I was going to choose the Endorphin Pro 2 or if I was going to pick the Endorphin Pro Plus, which showed up like 3 weeks before the marathon. Ultimately, I went with the Endorphin Pro 2. The way I knew I was going to do the Endorphin Pro, just based off of a lot of experience in the first version. And then in the second version, I probably have between them maybe like 200 miles on both those shoes. I would test them on long runs, and I would wear like one of my marathon options, and then I would put on this shoe and then run in that. And I always just found that for me, the running felt more effortless and more protected, and I felt less beat up. And that's just all my personal experience in the shoe. And I like a firmer ride, and so I wanted something a little bit firmer. Of the marathon options, of the plated, super shoe options, the Endorphin Pro sits on that firmer end. I think that the geometry of the speed roll works really well for me and just feels really natural and smooth. the plate's really rigid, but because of the geometry, I just felt like it worked for me there. Ultimately, though, between the plus and the 2, I think there was just a level of familiarity and confidence that I had because I had done a 22 miler and an 18 miler in the Endorphin Pro 2. And the longest run that I had in the plus was a 17 miler, which went great. But I did have to change my lacing at mile 12 to lock it down because it had stretched a little bit. And I think just the unknown of, hey, I had to change lacing once. Should I switch it up, or should I just go with what I know worked for 22, no problem? And so I think that's ultimately where it came. I just felt more confident, and it was one less thing on my mind because I had so many other things going into race day. Honestly, the shoe was like not that important for someone like me. And so I just found like I felt really comfortable in it, confident in it, and so I was going to go with it.
I would encourage, we had a post not too long ago where I talked a little bit about which shoe you should choose for marathon, how you prep in that. And I think coming down to what you're comfortable with going into the race is really important, right? And that's what you need to be doing on your long runs leading up to the marathon, is figuring out what gear works for you, whether it's nutrition, shoes, and go with what you're most confident in. It doesn't matter what studies are showing or what have you, like what's most efficient. Like, you have to realize they're only doing that on like 12 people, and that may or may not have anything to do with you, right? So we don't have the research to figure out how most of these quote super shoes or racing shoes are actually affecting different populations, right? We only just have pretty much a couple college kids or like semi-pro runners that, you know, most of us are not. So going with what's comfortable and testing this out first and making that decision early is good. And I think honestly, I love the Endorphin Pro Plus. Did I say that in the right order?
Yeah, finally.
Yeah, I've had a trouble
You
with
did
that.
it.
Yes, finally. I still think Plus Pro sounds better. But go with what's comfortable and test this out. Do not pull out anything new on race day. I know sometimes things happen, but again, try to control as many variables as you can, because when you get to race day, there's going to be a lot of variables you can't control.
Yeah.
So try to take care of that stuff. And again, the quote unquote fastest shoe for another person is not going to be the best shoe for you, especially the marathon, because it's really about getting to the finish line.
There
right?
would be
I just had listened to an interview with Galen Rupp going into Chicago. I think it was Sweat Elite has their podcast, and they had him on, and they interviewed him, and they had asked him, you know, like, do you like the Next Percent too, or do you like the Alpha Fly, and what are you going to wear in Chicago? And he was like, I love them both. They're both great shoes. Like, for the marathon, I like this a little bit more. It seems to fit for my mechanics. I'm going to go with the Alpha Fly. You look at everyone else around them, they're all wearing Next Percents. And then some people are like, oh, the Alpha Fly is dead. It's like, no, it's not. It's just, he likes that shoe. They like that shoe. It's just, it's a matter of which one do you like.
Yep. And maybe
he said for the half, he might have a different decision.
Right. And maybe did he say if they get their own VO2 testing done?
Oh, no, he didn't mention any like biometric stuff. I don't think he did. I kind of had it on in the background. I would tune in every once in a while intently, but I mean, I would imagine they have their own studies at Nike, but I don't know.
I would bet large sums of money, because I've definitely seen photos of him with that. So I would bet large sums of money. Yeah. I would guarantee you that they do VO2 max testing and all that
for
kind
them
of stuff.
individually.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. I know they
sure
did
they
when the
that.
Flynet racer, I think, was coming out back when he was still running on the track. I think they had him do some stuff for that.
Gotcha.
That they showed.
I mean, they definitely analyze every aspect of his biomechanics. So I'm guaranteeing they're doing VO2 max and physiologic testing on him. So I'm sure he knows.
I will also say, for somebody like me, I don't think any shoe would have made a difference for my last 2 miles of how the race went. But
no,
I mean,
let's
talk about, people might argue that, but the first 24 gets you there, you know, so I get that, but I'm just throwing that out there.
So I
agree completely, because the deeper I'm getting into some of these long efforts, you get to a point where you're like, this shoe is not going to save me. It's all me. You get to that point, and it's just like nothing from this shoe is contributing to what I am currently putting out.
Yeah.
And you come to that realization pretty harshly sometimes. But
Yeah.
Then you have to crawl to the finish.
Oh yeah.
But let's talk about briefly your race experience.
Sure. I'll do some highlights of it, I guess. So I was driving there in the morning. It was cool. The start was only like 40 minutes from my parents' house. So our whole family went over, stayed at my parents', and then I woke up early and drove to the race start. It started in Grafton. It was a point-to-point. So it started in a town called Grafton at their high school. And so on our way there, it was like thundering and lightning. So that was cool. I'm like, this is great. Yay. And it was raining pretty hard, but thankfully, I got my warm-up was in the rain, but I brought like extra socks and I did my run in my warm-up in different shoes. So anyway, so it was raining a lot, but by the time the race started, it had calmed down quite a bit and conditions were pretty fine. It was like mid to upper 60s and like pretty humid, and then occasional rain. It probably rained for like an hour during the race, but the rain actually felt pretty good. It wasn't like windy or anything. But it was fun to toe the line. I mean, I haven't like raced in such a long time, and I haven't done a marathon since 2017. So it was so weird to like be there and know that the gun is going to go off and then I'm going to run for like 3.5 to 4 hours. It's like, I guess this is what I'm doing today. I just hadn't had that experience in a long time, and I just forgot completely what it was gonna be like. But it was just really fun. There's like 2,000 runners who did it this year, and so it's a solid sized race, and especially for someone who's more middle pack like me, like I always had people around me. I talked about lacing as one of the reasons why I wanted to go with the Endorphin Pro 2. The irony is that at mile 8, my foot went numb on my left side. So I actually stopped to relace my shoe and I had, at that point, at like mile 5, I started chatting with this one guy he's doing actually really cool things in Chicago with people in low income housing, where he like goes in and checks the efficiency of their homes. And because they'll have these super low rates, but their utility bills are so high because they're so inefficient. So he goes in there and helps them find out, how can we make your home more efficient in terms of heating and cooling and stuff. Anyway, so we were in a cool conversation. I was like, I got to stop because my foot's going numb. So I stopped and loosened my shoe. So that's the irony of choosing a shoe I felt more confident in. But it didn't bother me, thankfully. The other thing I should say, I went to the bathroom multiple times before I started, but I still had to go at the start line. And I was like, but there was no time. There was like 3 minutes. And I'm like, I can't go, so I'll just hold it. So I'll kind of come back to that later maybe. But yeah, so he relaced my shoe at mile 8, and it was one of those days I never felt like I really got in rhythm. Like I just never felt effortless, but my best miles were probably between 14 and 21. So like 14 to 21, I felt like I was just kind of like as best as I was that day, kind of just gliding along, and felt pretty good. And it's a pretty flat course, so that was fun. But then like mile 23 hit, and I started to get really like, it was where I knew like the mental game was going to come in terms of like having to gut it out. And actually at mile 21, it was like a cool moment of like realizing I'm going to be able to finish the race today. And there's like a huge wave of thankfulness that I had for like all the people who helped me with my training, tons of other stuff, because like I feel like you can never take it for granted. At least I've had a number of bad experiences training for marathons. So just to get to a point where I was like, I'm going to be able to finish this thing was like this wave. And I noticed I was running faster, and I was like, okay, I got to chill out because I'm still like 5 miles away from the end. So anyway, I got to mile like 20, 22, started to get really tired. 24, I was really, really tired, and I just had to pee really bad. Like it was catching up with me, and I was deciding, I'm like, do I just go in my shorts? Like, I feel like people probably do that. Or I was just passing a place called Bradford Beach, and there was a porta potty. Like, or I could stop because I'm tired and go. And that's what I did. And retrospectively, I wish I would have went pee earlier in the race, just at like mile 1, and just like stopped and went, because then you're not in rhythm yet, and you can, who cares about that 30 seconds there? But I went into the porta potty, and my arms were shaking and my legs were shaking and my head started like spinning. And I thought, like, if I faint in here, who's going to get me out of this porta potty? Because it was a standalone one. Like, it wasn't like a bunch for the race. It's just like one that's like normally there. So I was legitimately like concerned, and everything was shaking. It was really weird. So anyway, so I got out, and thankfully, like, once I got running, I kind of normalized in terms of my body's regulation. But the last 2 miles were kind of just run as far as I could. But now that I was out of rhythm, it was hard to keep going. So I probably walked 5 or 6 times for 10 seconds, 10 steps even. And then I just kind of kept looking at my watch, and I was like, I think I'm going to finish under 3:30. And I snuck in at 3:29:44. So I had 16 seconds to spare. But it was great to finish. And like, my wife and our 2 kids were there. My parents were there at the end. I had one of my former students that I had I was their clinical instructor. She came out because she lives in Milwaukee. And then another family of our good friends who live in Milwaukee were all there, kind of just cheering me on, which was just super cool. It's like, yeah, running's not really individual. It's so communal. So it was a fun day. I was exhausted afterwards. I was sitting on a bench and kind of by myself, like my family was all eating like a picnic, and I just started crying. And my wife was like, you okay? Like, can I do something for you? I was like, I'm fine. I'm not even like happy crying. I'm just tired. Like, I'm legitimately just so tired that I'm crying right now. She's like, oh, honey. So it felt like those early months of having a kid, and I had like cried at night when we're so tired because they wake up all the time, just exhaustion crying. So that's what happened, but it was just such a gift to be able to finish. And I know, I'm not the fastest guy in the world, but I think that's what makes running so cool, is that your own, day can be just as cool to you as it is for somebody else who's qualifying for Boston or making the Olympic trials. There's just so much to be had in the sport, and it was fun day. There's my story.
That was a solid one.
That was great.
Had ups and downs and twists and turns and nearly fainting and crying.
David and I didn't know any of this stuff. At least
I didn't know that either. I was
multiple times. I didn't know. Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, we purposely didn't talk about it so that I could tell you guys the story. Yeah.
Like, that is true. We established that like Monday.
That makes sense.
Matt was like, Nate, tell us more about it. And Bach's like, no, save it for the podcast.
I can get to know anything.
I can relate to that bathroom experience, though. Not in a race situation, but I had to do it mid-workout one time. And it was just one of those random residential ones in front of someone's house. And like, you get in there and you're just like literally like you can't control your body. And like you're going from going like full speed or racing effort or workout effort to having to stop point blank, center yourself into something, get the job done, get it back out.
Sometimes switching from a sympathetic to a parasympathetic part of your nervous system is not the most pleasant. And then you got to get that back going.
Then you got to get
that's
back.
The fight or flight, right? You got to go from fight or flight to bathroom eating, like cognitive stuff, and then go back.
Yeah.
Buddy's like, why? What do we like? We're gonna die.
Yes, like, totally.
Yeah, I remember my hands shaking like crazy, and I like had a hard time. Like, I know exactly what that feels like.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one. It was weird, but I'm glad I didn't faint.